This is probably the last generation of leaders that will only manage humans. The next generation are going to have to deal with agents, multi-agentic setups, robots, whatever it may be, and they may even be managed by any. I don't know. I mean, like the future is wide open on a lot of these things. So some of this stuff is really, there's going to be new skills that are going to be needed.
So today we're joined by Rob Ott. He co-founded a global pharma powerhouse that scaled from a two-person garage to over 5,000 employees. Now Rob's helping leaders navigate a world where AI is going to expose every lazy leader in the industry. Let's talk about the future of leadership conduct. Welcome, Rob.
Welcome. Oh, thank you, David. It's great to be with you.
So, Rob, I'm excited because I love to talk with coaches about how they got into this world of coaching, but also you built your own business. You're an entrepreneur. You understand the struggles of starting out with bootstrapping,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why did you even start in the garage? Why not take a traditional route?
Well, the business that we had was pharmaceutical services business. For the folks that are in that industry, it was contract research. And, we ended up being at a company in the 90s that went through, I guess, what I would call, I think it was three or four major reorganizations in 5 years. It was just that time there was a lot of, consolidation. And what we
Yeah.
realized is once we were on number four, it was the same as number two structurally. And it was just
Mhm.
exhausting. And so, also at the time, we were coming out of an experience where the team that I worked with got the first monoclonal antibody for breast cancer approved with the FDA. It was a drug called Herceptin. It was a really exciting time,
Mhm.
and it opened the door for a lot of other therapies. That was really what we were passionate and animated about, which was the treatment of cancer patients and offering new therapies for them. And so, we
Yeah.
started out consulting. So I can't even say we actually started building a company. We started consulting because at the time in the late 90s, there was a lot of difficulty in the industry where the pharma companies that would hire a company like mine were talking past each other.
Mhm.
And so I really honed a lot of skills in being almost an interpreter and a harmonizer and a communicator. And so we
Mhm.
found that we were able to insert ourselves to explain to to the vendor, the contract research company, what the pharma company wanted, and we also were able to explain to the pharma companies and the biotechs what the CROs could do. And so there was
Mhm.
there was a space for us in there. And really, just through I'm going to say a lot of hard work and a lot of luck. I mean, I think you have to attribute them to being in the right place at the right time and serving your customers well. But we turned around a few
Yeah.
times and we had great word of mouth business development and we kept hiring people and expanding our projects and then we were off
Mm.
and running.
Wow. I mean, it kind of sounds easy, but I know it's not easy, and it's a struggle. Were there any times like when you're going through that process, you're kind of wondering like, what am I doing?
Oh, all the time. I mean, like imposter syndrome is a real thing. Like you kind of look back at yourself, and yeah, I mean, I guess I can make it sound really smooth, but there were days where we were trying to we were trying to solve some really gnarly scientific problems and operationalize some really challenging relationships and meeting our deliverables, and that wasn't always fun. Like that was work.
Mhm.
We had a lot of high pressure. So, there was always relationships that we were managing. And that was really where my strength was, I was able to get a lot of things done. But at the same time, I was able to bring people along with me and communicate and,
Yeah.
like I said, harmonize and serve as that interpreter. But, there were days like, I mean,
Yeah.
we were starting this very early on. We were in the middle of the financial crash in 2008 and 2009. And that was a shock to the system because
Yeah.
our business relied
Yeah.
on investment. The small biotechs that we were working with all relied on investment and all that froze up. So we had to really scramble and figure out what we were going to do. And if I
Mhm.
may, I mean, one of the other things that was really interesting for us at the time was that we focused so much on building our business around our people that
Mhm.
we were a remote company in 2000. Like we were completely remote. We never had we had like one small headquarters where we had like maybe a
Mhm.
two or three offices, but for the most part, if you had a
Yeah.
laptop and at that time an air card, It didn't matter where you were in the world. Like we were just happy to have you. And so what that did though, it liberated us to
Yeah.
say, let's put our dream team together. If our best quality person is on the
Hmm.
West Coast, then let's hire him. I feel bad
Yeah.
for my poor, HR leader because, it was like, oh, we're hiring somebody in Indiana. You got to learn the local regs for her, so, but it gave
Right.
us a lot of freedom.
Yeah. So through that process, as you start out, the two of you, you're growing the business, it's building and growing. Did you know about coaching when you started your business? Like executive leadership coaching,
Not when I
stuff like that?
started, but I did get introduced to it fairly
Yeah.
early. I mean, one of the nice things about some of our clients is that they did have some progressive for the time learning and development parts of their organization. So I came across coaches. I mean, it wasn't,
Hmm.
probably within the first five
Okay.
years was my first exposure to it.
Okay. So did you, as you were a leader trying to navigate growing, right? And developing and all these different nuances of, the pressure, the work you're doing and learning to manage like accelerate growing team, right? Did you have to bring in a coach or what was your experience with coaches
Yeah, my direct experience
as
was
a
that I
leader?
kind of hit a plateau.
Mm,
Strategically, you get to a point where you move from, just managing by catastrophe or just by, reactivity to really thinking in systems and being strategic. And I kind of like, I guess maybe about 10 years into this, I kind of hit a strategic plateau where I had always filled the role on my team as the devil's advocate. So I was always the worrywart. I was always the person like with contingency plans. And I thought at the time I was awesome. Like I had everything covered and I was thinking of things. And, it by that time we were probably, over 100 people and the leaders that I was working with that we had brought in, I was starting to develop a reputation for being, the wet blanket. Like every time something was coming up and we were dealing with it, like it would be Rob kind of, bringing everybody down. And so I
yeah.
started to get a little bit of a reputation for not being as strategic as I could be. The remedy
Mm,
for that was to hire a coach, and that's where I met my coach, who I still work with today. And that's, this is like now a dozen years later, that he and
wow.
I
Yeah.
still stay in touch and connect. But that was my first experience with executive coaching.
Hmm. So obviously that was a pretty positive relationship because you're still connected 12 years later. What were some of the things that you had to work on as a leader to grow for that company?
Yeah, I think, it's a lot of it, like I said, is you start out with skill sets and, just as we were talking earlier, like I was a generalist. I was always able to talk
Mhm,
to, the operations teams and tell them what finance was looking for because I had a really wide understanding of a lot of different concepts, but I wasn't very, deep. I wasn't a specialist in any area.
mhm,
And what I think I ended up having like learned through all this is that my experience was I like I said, I hit a plateau. I really needed
mhm,
to like expand that. And most importantly, I needed to own it. Like I think that was the first key
mhm,
step in developing it was at first I was like, I didn't believe the feedback. I mean, like there's a part of me that's like, but wait a minute, I'm trying to do the right thing for the team and I'm playing that role of devil's advocate or the contrarian. And it wasn't until I really
yeah,
like owned it and absorbed it as part of my own development that I was able to unlock and grow. And my coach really worked hard on me. I mean, I remember there was a point I met him at a Dunkin' Donuts, and I think it was like our second or third session, and he hit me right between the eyes with, you've got a choice now. You have the feedback, you can absorb it and grow, or we can stop. And
mhm,
I mean, it probably wasn't
mhm,
that harsh, but it felt like how your whole earth moved like 3 inches to the right. You felt everything lurch, and I was like, okay, game on. I
right.
got to get into this.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because we understand our motivations, right? And we understand why we're doing things in a certain way most of the time. At least we think that to ourselves. And then when we start to get feedback from other people doing like a 360 assessment, then kind of reality hits because it's a question to me of the process of coaching, right? Because do you work on you becoming a better you, or if you're in like leadership, if you're being coached for leadership development at like the top level, right? Or do you work on becoming a better leader for your business, right? For the people you lead. And so when you get that feedback, it's hard because you have such good
Hmm.
intentions about growing the business, being there for the people. You're like, I thought I was doing everything right.
It was
And then you're
jarring.
like,
Yeah, it was absolutely, and I'm sorry I broke in, but you hit it right on the head. It was, there is a level of acceptance that comes with a person who is coachable. And I didn't know I was like,
mhm,
you can't draw this up. It's not like I was thinking this was going to happen in my mind, but
yeah,
in order to really grow, you have to be willing to take that feedback and, process it and like I said, own it. I mean, really.
that's hard, right? Because you have to accept that you're not perfect
Hmm.
and that you have and be humble about it.
The degree of professional maturity. The maturity that comes along with that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut in.
No, no, you're 100% right, right? Because you have to be the people who are mature enough to understand and separate the emotion from it. And if you're really there for the business and for the people in the business, it's like being a father, right? You have
Yes,
kids
I do. Yep, 3 kids.
and you want to be the best dad you can be for them, right? You don't want to be the jerk, right?
Yeah,
And so, I mean, when you're running a business, you're a leader in a business, it's kind of like being a parent. And if you want to be there to separate the familiar ties, but you like if you want that business to grow and to do the best and to be a high performing, then you need to be the best leader for those people. And I think that is it's hard, but when you realize that it's not really about you, it's about either the business or the people that you're working with, then you can accept that okay, for them I need to do these things so that we as a organization as a group make that pivot and really like launch.
and I think, one of the other things that I benefited from was, my mentor, and my, direct supervisor for years, in the hierarchy of the company. In time, we brought in a really experienced COO. She was a coach as
Mm,
well, and, she actually was very encouraging for me to take this on when I was, starting to figure out what I wanted to do after the business. But we
yeah.
always traced it back to value. So very similar to what you're saying. We sat down as a company and really figured out what was most important to us. I still have them hanging on my wall, actually. I'm looking at them right now. But
Mm,
ultimately,
mm,
all that came back to like it wasn't a family business, but it was really collegial and it was really focused on, how
yeah.
do we, if we unlock the human potential and we give people as much as we can to support them, the magic happened, and
Yeah.
that was really important to us. And so, yeah, there was a very like paternalistic, and not only male paternalistic, I mean like a parental kind of overview, familial kind of
Y-
feel to that
Yeah.
company. Yeah, our culture was great like that.
Yeah. I love it. The way I see, companies today, I wish that the cultures of company were, you don't need to be families. Like I disagree like now that you want to make the company feel like like a family because there's
You need
other things with
boundaries.
that.
Yeah,
But yeah, but you want to make it so that yeah, people enjoy being there, that you want to like you're excited to be there to be working together because you spend so much time. Like you spend more time with your coworkers than your families most of the time. I mean, in
yeah.
traditional structures, right?
Yeah, and if I can comment on that, I mean, you get perspective from time and distance. And, we built the company up and then we were acquired in 2016. So it's been almost 10 years since the acquisition. I mean, wow, when I really think about it, that's wild. I just wanted people, I think I take great pride in when I see people that I used to work with or I've come across them in different settings, and I get the comments that this was
Mhm.
the best place I ever worked. This was a great field.
Yeah.
Like, so even though it's not a family business, it was really important to,
Yeah.
to create that culture and that
Yeah.
environment. And that's something that even with my coaching and the advisory that I do now,
Yeah.
I'm always focused on like how can you improve that culture? And it's got to be natural, but it's something to strive for sure.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to ask is how has your experience as a leader, your experience being coached informed the work you do now as a coach?
Yeah, I think I understood. It was really interesting. Like I understood the value of coaching, and I understood the process from
Mm,
a standpoint of going through it, and having been coached. So I think that was really invaluable to me in a lot of ways, and there are tiny ways. It's just the way feedback's going to be received, the way that you could deliver it, when to what we call honest label something like, and that's that hit you right between the eyes with something really important. But you got to work to that. You got to build that
Mm,
relationship. So those are all, really, critical and
yeah.
important components to that. I think that I didn't realize it at the time, but the cultivation of self-awareness, being able to accept that feedback
Mm,
that I was talking about, being able to process it, that really unlocked a lot of different things. So I'm always looking for that moment. That's what I start with when I'm coaching a leader is I want to
yeah.
get a sense of how self-aware they are and how they can build that up. Because once you can unlock that, I mean, that doesn't solve every problem by any stretch or even, help them address every opportunity, but knowing what you know going in about yourself really does, shape the future for you.
The man who introduced me into coaching, his name is Will Linson. He called it, "Is the leader coachable?" Like, what's their coachability assessment?
Yeah.
Like, are they humble enough? Will they take action on these changes? Will they be disciplined to do these things? I think most coaches, I don't know, like it's because it's about client selection. If you as a coach can choose between like 10 people and some of them are not humble, like would you want to work with them, or should you like, and this is kind of goes into a little bit your client selection, like how do you go about client selection. I know a lot of coaches out there are sometimes too desperate for work, and so they don't even think about it. But the problem with that is like you end up in a business relationship, right? With somebody who is just one, maybe just not excited to be in that relationship with you, but two is just going to be like a soul sucking vampire
Yeah.
in some
Well,
ways.
some people drain energy and some people radiate. It's just, the way that the world works. I think that I struggled with that when I first started because, there's a component to some of the certifications. It's like you got to get hours and you got to get time with people. So you're out there like, I'll coach anybody.
Hmm.
And that's just not a really good
Yeah.
recipe for success. You asked, I guess, how I do
Hmm.
it. And, my main component is really all about the chemistry call that I call it a chemistry call in the beginning, or at least a meeting so that we can sit down
Yeah.
and understand what that person's looking for. Understand, like, again, I don't have a formal coachability assessment. Like, I don't put them through a questionnaire or anything like that, but I
Mhm.
will sit down and like, if I connect with them and I'm able to understand what they're looking for and it's in my skill set to
Yeah.
help them, then sure. But I will, it comes with confidence. But at this point, if there's somebody that I know is not going to be a good fit for me, I will beg off or refer them to a colleague. And, that's one of the beauty, and we can talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that, but the beauty of being in a coaching community is that I've got so many connections that I know
Yeah.
that people specialize in all different modalities and all different, types of coaching. And sometimes it's a better fit. And, like, and I'll finish with this
Yeah.
point, but it's the confidence that you get to know that you're not like there's things that you just have to say no to or should back away from and not feel like you should coach everybody.
Do you feel like it's your experience as a business owner, business leader? Because like I imagine you had to make a lot of hard decisions, right? And you went through those experiences. Do you feel like that helps with your ability to say no to clients?
Does. I think, one of the things that I drilled into when I was kind of starting my coaching journey and really getting serious about it was, I spoke to somebody and they were like, "What's your superpower?" And it took me a little bit, I mean, the question took me back. Like I was like, "Oh."
Mm,
And my superpower to kind of bring it to your point is that I have 25, 30 years of experience of living this life. I know what entrepreneurs are
mhm,
going through. I know what it's like to deal with hyper growth. I know those tough trade-offs and those decisions.
mm,
I tried to, and I did this with varying degrees of success, but I think most people that you talk to that worked for me would probably, or worked with me, would say that, I did my best to explain why I was doing things. Why, like I had to make decisions about whether, I'll give you an example. Like, I used to manage a triage call, a sales triage call where, the sales teams would bring in these opportunities and some of them were just not fits, whether it was a resourcing opportunity or it didn't fit the overall strategy. And, sometimes I would have to say
mm,
to a business, a hardworking, business development person, we can't do this project. We just don't have the staff. We're not going to deliver with quality. it's a problem. And
Mm,
that was a tough call. I mean, I don't shy away from them because I think somebody has to make that decision,
yeah.
but I always explained why. They may not have liked it, and I'm sure, and I know, I have some friends still that, didn't like it, but, generally speaking, I tried my best to help them understand.
Yeah. In my perspective, like the more experience you have, the better you can do anything, right? So if you're a carpenter, the more things you build, the better you just get over time.
Hmm.
And I think for coaches too, it's very similar. Like the more life experience you have, the more coaching experience you have, it naturally just gonna make you better at doing that thing. And so that's why I was curious how that informed your ability to do that of selecting your clients that you work with.
You know what the biggest challenge in that was? And I'll just share this real quick, and then, we can pivot off of it if you want. But in my role, I was very decisive. I had to make a lot of
Hmm.
decisions. I had to give a lot of recommendations and a lot of advice. And I think one of the biggest
Yeah.
adjustments for me as a coach was, the methodology of, I'm not telling you what to do anymore. I could solve this problem for you. I mean, like,
Hmm.
that was naturally my skill set. I want you to solve it. I want you to do
Yeah.
the work. I want you to do the growth. We always use the analogy, at least the group that I worked with, which was, I'm walking on the path with you with a flashlight. I'm not in front of you. I'm not leading you. I'm
Mm,
just showing you some things that you may not have seen. And hopefully you're guiding you along that
yeah.
way.
I'd love to hear your view of what coaching is and your approach to it, because you brought up this point of like, I could tell you exactly how to solve this problem, right? Or am I guiding you, shining the light for you? So, in your definition of what is coaching, like what is coaching for you?
I think, for me, I come out of the school from Columbia, the 3CP program, the Columbia coaching program. And we look at it as total person coaching. I mean, like, it's really surfacing their issues and helping them see things in a different way. If anybody from the Columbia program's listening, they're probably going to laugh at me because I'm not going to articulate it as nearly as well as the folks do. But it's really, like, understanding that the solution's in them. And it's my job to help them reveal
Hmm.
that. I always look at it as, I have to
Mm,
build trust so that that I have permission to advance. And, I can't just give them the
hmm.
answer. Some of them don't want the answer. Some of them really want, it fluctuates. Sometimes they're just
Yeah,
like, just tell me what the answer is. And I'm
yeah,
like, well, if you really want to know,
yeah,
okay, we'll talk, but I want you to do that work. But my
yeah.
idea, my philosophy in that is, I'm here to lend my experience so that, however long our duration of our engagement is, by the time you end it with me, or we kind of come to a conclusion, you're better skilled to handle the things that you're going to be dealing with in life because of the work you did, not because I solved problems for you. That's a consultant. Like,
Yeah.
it's a wholly
Yeah.
different animal.
Yeah, because sometimes, like in the conversations that I've had with other coaches, there's a blend of coaching and mentoring,
Hmm.
right? And so obviously you can consult, and that's pretty. I think that's understandable. But when the lines of coaching and mentoring, and let me know your experience, right? Like the clients who select to work with you, part of it is, I would assume, factors in your background as an entrepreneur who exited and who's been there, right?
Yeah, they come to me for a specific reason, and more often than not. I think what I found is there is that subset, there is that group of people that are, like, in C-suite, emerging, developing senior leaders.
Mm,
And that's a very straightforward, like, they're coming to me because of my experience. I've done some pro bono work. I've done some work with, young, like, I call them emerging professionals because they're just coming into the
yeah,
industry. They need more mentoring. So I will modify my style
yeah.
because they just don't have the life
Okay.
experience. I can't draw on their experience to help them solve their problem. So we have different kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
I'm still not telling them what to do, but I'm giving them more of a
Yeah.
sounding board than I would say for, like, a C-suite or like an emerging leader kind of thing.
Okay. Makes sense. I want to go back to the topic that you brought up, which was about community, because this came up in another conversation as well. It's, the coaching community. So, what does your community look like? How do you guys interact with each other? How do you guys work together or collaborate? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. And, I think that probably the overarching component that I would say in my community is like my desire for networking. And I'm not saying this is part of my community. Maybe I shouldn't frame it that way. But when I left my company and made my exit, I
Mm,
realized that I had let a lot of my network wither. Like I knew everything that was going on in the business, but outside of it,
hmm
I was really like looking around saying, oh my gosh, like I haven't kept up with a lot of the things that I want to. So I committed when I started
mm,
this new endeavor to really build a network. And so, I
mm,
had, I think there were 35 of us in the Columbia cohort that I went through in 2023, and we've all, I can't say we've all stayed close and in touch, but we have like we have a WhatsApp chat room that we all kind of chime in on every once in a while. I will make a point to reach out to some of my closer colleagues, and we just kind of bounce things off of each other, sounding board style. We have like a monthly meeting where we get together, but we drive those so that we have the ability to, just to connect. And through that,
yeah.
through those folks, I've made connections with other coaches. I've kept in touch, like I said, with my coach, who's now, I guess, pretty much retired at this point. But he and I still talk about, he's actually been a great mentor to me in helping me develop my business and work in my
Mm,
confidence, just as, I mean, because like it's almost like starting
yeah.
over. But building that community was really important. And I've stayed in touch with the folks at Columbia. I'm fortunate I live in New Jersey, so I'm only, 45 minutes outside of the city if I need to get up into New York.
Yeah.
And we just had an amazing event in October where, there was 500 of us that were on it was a conference run by Columbia that was focused on hybrid intelligence for coaching. And it was an amazing event. And I got to reconnect
Okay.
with a bunch of my old instructors and, that group. So I
Cool.
think that the communities are there, but the other component is you got
Mm,
to work to build your community too. So, and that's something, like I said, I really focused on this
yeah.
time around.
Do you have like a small community that you guys kind of collaborate with? Like as you're saying, like this person doesn't fit me, but I know somebody who they would work well with. Do you guys kind of have like a not necessarily like a formalized group, but like a informal, like here's my short list of
We do. Yeah. And I would say, and I'll give you an example. Like there's one coach that I work with. She was in my cohort. She and I just like really hit it
Mhm,
off. She's based on the West Coast. I'm in a little bit of a sticky wicket with one of my, potential clients. And,
mhm,
I didn't do anything unethical or anything like that, but I'm like, I don't know how I would handle this. And I need an objective viewpoint. So I texted her today and I said, hey, can I get
okay.
15 minutes with you tomorrow? I just need like a laser session real
Yeah.
fast to like go through something. And I'm looking forward to catching up with her regardless, but she's going to help me out. So
Yeah.
we do those kinds of things for each other where the one of the women that I
Okay.
worked with that is a coach, she's an internal coach. She had a bunch of AI
hmm
questions, and so she knows that I'm involved in
mm,
that, and was asking me just systems thinking. How are you working with my clients on some of those things? So, it's a
okay.
village. And you bond with people, and
Yeah.
you like. I'm thrilled that we've stayed as close in touch that we have, because you're always worried you have these great experiences,
mhm,
and then the groups dissolve, the purpose like finishes up. When we were having our last night together, I
Yeah.
looked around and I'm like, this is the last time we're all going to be in the same room together. And it was kind of like a poignant moment, but
mhm,
we do our best to stay in touch where we
Yeah.
can.
No, I love that. I would say that that's probably one of my biggest regrets is like, because I'm from the States. I was born in Chicago. I went to university and then I moved out. So I'm living that expat life, right? But when I did that, I kind of there are a few people I stayed in contact with, but not a lot. And so like, I really again like kind of like you said, like my network kind of withered because I just I got busy with the work that I was doing out in Asia, and then life happened and kids, and then work and kids, and then it's hard to like try to stay connected.
And one of the ways, and I don't know, maybe this is something to think about. I'll offer this up to you, and you can make of it as you wish. But
Mhm.
like, when I started coaching again 4 years ago, seriously, I went out and reintroduced myself to a lot of the people. I used it as an opportunity, not so much to sell the business. Like, I mean, there was always that,
Yeah,
that ancillary effect, but I just wanted to reintroduce myself to
yeah,
folks like, hey, what have you been doing? So, we always talk about
Yeah.
that 1,000 cups of coffee. One cup of coffee leads you to somebody else, to another person. So you're always out, like,
Yeah.
talking to people and networking and everything else. So we were talking a
So,
little bit about kids. My son's going to go to college next week. Actually, he's leaving in New Zealand. And, so
oh
going from
wow.
New Jersey to New Zealand, he's been there before, but I'm like, really spend some time building up your support network, your friends, it's a great time to be there,
Yeah.
but he's going to be really far away from, what he's used to. So it's really important to have that people
Yeah.
around you.
You didn't become a coach to be a marketer. But if you want to build a sustainable business, you need a system that works for you while you're coaching. Coach Ops is designed to help you go from unpredictable referrals to a reliable marketing system without it feeling pushy or salesy. If you're ready to build something systematic, visit kyber5.com/coach ops. That's going to be a great experience because I think anytime, any opportunity you can go and, be in a different culture and just open yourself to learning is, I didn't realize, like, as a Korean American, like, I thought I was pretty, like, open and understanding of the world. And then as I left America and spent almost a decade and a half in Asia, I was like, wow, the way the world perceives like what's going on and the way we think in America are so different.
Yeah.
And culture, society, all that stuff is plays into it. But I think it's great, and like we should all try to spend time outside of our normal like social context. I want to jump into the AI because AI is such a big, it's the elephant in the room,
Yep.
right? So what's the situation for you? Are you coaching people who are doing like AI development, or are they worried about AI? What is the thing that what's the cross section between your coaching and AI?
Yeah. So there is this is a work in progress. So I don't want to sit here and ever
Mhm.
explain to you that I have it all figured out. I'm doing a lot
Mm,
of work. First of all, I mean, I think where I come from I've always been like tech curious, tech philic, whatever adjective you want to put on it. So like I was saying, we were
mhm.
building air cards and, running people with laptops 25 years ago before anything like that was
Yeah.
even normal. Um, but
Yeah.
ultimately, like what I'm doing, so part of my advisory and consulting is working with a trade organization that focuses on the life sciences here in New Jersey. And so I run their AI digital health team. And that's put me in contact with a number of, incredibly smart, thoughtful leaders from, all the way from small
Mm,
startups that like are vibe coding and building, crazy apps that are just solving things that I was like, I didn't even know that was a
yeah.
problem. And then, they're
Yeah.
brilliant all the way up to like enterprise level people at like IBM and Johnson that are just, really looking
Mm,
at drug development in an entirely different way. And it's an exciting time. I think where I'm focused in on it is that I recognize that there's a couple of things. So I'm going to throw out some data points or some information. You know, this
yeah.
um, this is probably the last generation of leaders that will only manage humans. The next generation are going to have to deal with agents, multi-agentic setups, robots, whatever it may be, and they may even be managed by any, I don't know. I mean, like the future is wide open on a lot of these things. So some of this stuff is really, there's going to be new skills that are going to be needed. I'm doing a lot of
Mhm.
reading on, like when you think about what work is and where value is created and the systems thinking changes,
Mm,
everybody talks about AI is going to take your job or it's not going to take your job. Like, I don't know what the answer to that is. I think what I do know is that there's a lot that's going to change. And there are a number
yeah.
of leaders that really need to become I guess I'll call it data fluent or AI savvy. They don't necessarily need to code. They don't necessarily need to be on the front
Mhm.
lines with it, but they need to understand it enough to run an organization that's going to be impacted by it.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to
Yeah.
do is help them on ramp to that. And there's also a lot of fear. I mean,
Mhm.
when you think about the leaders that are in their
Yeah.
40s and 50s that are too young to actually retire, but are gonna like be in that
Mhm.
leadership role, they got to catch up. Like they have to really
Yeah.
like make that transition, and it's going to be a hard turn for a lot of people. So that's where I'm trying to insert
Yeah.
myself and help them. I don't want to
Yeah.
undersell the AI component. It's a big component, but there are a lot of change management, transformations, like those foundation fundamentals. Those are what
Mm,
a lot of the work has to be too.
yeah. Because, there's a lot of, as you said, like, there's a lot to cover, but as you said, there's a lot of fear about the AI taking your job. And so for the leaders you work with, like as you're coaching them, is that an underlying fear that they have? Or is it just like how do we leverage and use this technology for the business? What are their concerns about AI right now?
I mean, it's probably a little bit of all of the above, of the things you just said. But,
Mm,
ultimately, what I'm seeing is they're going through a technological change that is going so fast. You'll hear
mm,
people say they can't read fast enough to keep up. They don't know what it means. Like the stuff that they thought they understood yesterday is going to be different next week, or it's already changing. So the speed and their ability to make that turn, because I think a lot of people are just worried that they're going to be left behind. And so that's a primal fear. I mean, like, the
mm,
slowing down, life is passing you by. It doesn't, I mean, AI is doing it at
mm.
hyperspeed, but that's a real transition for anybody. And so these guys
Yeah.
and women, like they're in that stage of their career where you can't coast,
Mm.
like nobody's, and I'm not saying that they want to coast, but like they're being challenged in ways that they probably never have at speed and
Yeah.
scale.
Well, yeah, the speed at which technology is moving right now is every week, if not every day, something is being released and developed that is just another like step forward. But if we're taking a step forward every day where it used to be a step every like 6 months, every month, we're accelerating at such a pace that it's exponential growth, right? And
Yeah.
and development in so many different facets. I was just yesterday I listened to one of my favorite podcasts is Diary of a CEO
Hmm.
with Stephen Bartlett, and he was interviewing Tony Robbins.
Right.
And it's a great episode. Like, no, because it just dropped just maybe a few days ago. But Tony Robbins was saying like you gotta look for the patterns, right? And he was saying, back in the 1800s, the Luddites and the Thrashers, so they started bringing in technology that replaced the human workers,
Hmm.
what they were doing. And so the problem that happened was the workers, their identity was so wrapped up in the work that they did that when these machines could come in and do their work, one, they lost their job, two, they lost their identity.
Hmm.
And then the outcome or the reaction to that was fear, outrage, and then destruction of property and rioting.
Right. Right. And that is something that is primal. Like I said, it's real. It's people are going to lose
Yeah,
more than just their livelihoods in a lot of ways. Like their identity is important. You can go all the way back to even Queen Elizabeth. Like the development of the mechanical loom was just starting at that stage,
right.
and she wouldn't sanction a charter for them to develop that technology because it was going to up, all the cottage industry. I don't even know what you call a loomer. I don't know. Like whoever was a weaver, like whatever they were doing, was they were going to be out of work or out of a livelihood and out
Yeah,
of a out of an identity. I think you hit it on the head there.
like this is all fresh to me and I'm processing it. But it's right now, one is like it's a very real possibility, right? Of like I mean, this is why like Elon Musk is talking about UBI, right? Or universal income, right?
Basic income, yep.
Um universal basic income, right? Because there's going to be a whole lot of people out of a job. But, as you got kids, I've got a 10 and a 5-year-old. This is their life is going to they're going to walk right into
Yep.
this where they might have an AI agent managing them or they're going to be managing AI, right? I mean, obviously no one knows the answer, but how do we prepare for that? Yeah.
I think it's different. I mean, like, again, this is one angle, because there's, I've learned anything like life is all about perspective and complexity and nuance. But I'll
Mhm.
share another story, and this is from a book that I've been reading called Reshuffle, which is really an excellent book. I'll share it with you after
Mm,
later on. When you think about like, and I reflect on my career, like when I first started and I was doing work even before my company, I would literally go out
mhm,
into the field and hand write a report. I would bring that report back in
mhm.
and hand it into the word processing pool, and then they would type it up. And they were the people that were working in the word processors because we didn't have computers on every desk at the time. I'm really dating myself now,
Yeah,
but they were kind of the evolution of the typing pool. And when you think
yeah,
about it, typing, we had a typing pool because all of our document creation was
yeah,
constrained by the typewriter. Formatting, typing, it
yeah,
was all limited to that. The word processor
yeah.
basically reorganized that work because those people could then work on the computer and they didn't have the same constraints. And in time,
Mhm.
by the time I was, not too long after I started, that word processing group went away because everybody had a computer and a laptop. But the bottom line is that
Yeah.
everybody was still typing. Now, typing may go away one day. I mean, like, I think that that's the case, but the work was still there. It
Mm,
was just being done in a different way. So I think one of the things that I'm
mm,
trying to get people to think about when I coach them is where's the value extraction from the work? Like what is being reorganized and where do you need to be a part of it? The health industry is highly
yeah.
regulated, and it's something we're really looking at because I don't want to say doctors are going to go away. I mean, but the value that you place on a doctor's
Mm,
knowledge is being commoditized by AI.
mm,
So you don't know where that's going to
mhm,
change the system. And so the people that can predict that and can really analyze that or coordinate and reorganize that, that's where I think it's going to go. And I mean, UBI may be a thing for our future. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know
mm,
that there's going to be
mm,
stuff that needs to be done. And it's just a question of how do you
mm.
envision that? And that's where creativity comes in. Like systems
Yeah.
thinking, like I said, it's really, and for me, I'm fascinated by it. Like I'm in. Like I
Yeah.
want to see where it
Yeah.
goes, and if I can help people be comfortable doing that, even better.
For me, like one, I've always been interested in the technology, and I've learned over the years. I am a systems thinker. I like to look at the patterns. I like to see how things are working and fit together. But as a parent of young kids, like I want to learn this thing because I need to learn this so I can help them so that they can be successful because their future is going to be, I mean, it's changing fast now. I can't imagine in 10 years what it's looking like, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so they have to be adaptable. They have to be resilient to that change, and they have to be lifelong learners because right now we can't even keep up with the things that are changing. So, yeah, so I put it this way for my son because he's doing a project right now for school, and I was saying like right now the differentiating I think that will separate people are these three things, right? It's your ability to learn, your ability to apply, and how much effort you're going to put into all of those two things.
totally. You're spot on. I agree completely. I mean, I think so what I'm really paying attention to is what the schools are doing. I do some work,
Hmm.
in just in my traveling around the state. Like I'm very interested in some of the workforce development that's going on. But both because it's a coaching opportunity for me, but it's also, I'm thinking about my kids and
Yeah,
what do they need to learn. And I mean,
yeah,
you have the one extreme that says it's rotting their brain and they're never going to be critical thinkers because they're going to rely on the AI, and
hmm,
the people that don't know how to use it are going to be left behind on the other extreme because they never touched it and they have no idea how this magic box works and makes things happen. So somewhere in there, as
yeah,
with everything, there's a balancing point of, the I used to call it the
yeah,
Goldilocks spot where everything's just right. Like you've got the right balance of
hmm,
risk, and you're learning and
yeah,
you're hustling and applying things so that you can work on them. So yes.
yeah. So the way I was talking to somebody, so this is the way this is my metaphor. You have a hammer, right? And if you've never seen a hammer before, you've never interacted with one before, you might use it properly. You grab the handle and you hit the nail on the head. But you might use the handle to hit the nail. You might not even use it to hit a nail, right? Like you might just throw it. Like you've never seen it before. It's something brand new. And that's how I view like AI because it's so brand new. We're literally all experimenting with how do you use this thing? with like the stuff that I've been doing, and I'm looking at my kid, and I'm like, I don't want you to be, rotting your brain just scrolling
Right.
all the time. And so my approach was, how do you use it to learn and to surface what is like priority for you, right? And I think that the same thing is applicable to leaders, right? There's way too much information, 100%. But what is pertinent to you? What is going to actually help you in your one as your business function, but also as you as a leader? Like, what are the things that you should be watching out for?
Finding that on ramp though is
What else?
what I think, for everybody it's a different way, whether it's just learning a prompt
Yeah.
or learning how it's going to transform their business or writing a better email. I don't know. I mean, like, but getting that exposure is really important.
Yeah, you have to play with it, start to learn about it, and then try to apply the things you're learning. Like it's this learn apply cycle, right?
Multi-loop. Yep.
Because but yeah, but if you don't do it, then you're gonna get left behind. And so just I think the most important thing is to start with a simple something simple, apply it, and then once you start that cycle, it just keeps going, right?
Totally agree. Yeah.
But so I wanted just to say before we get back into the coaching stuff was that for my son, I wrote I created a writing app, and basically I wanted it to help him become a better writer. So that was my intent because all these people are using it to write their papers for them. Writing your paper for you, like you might as well just pay somebody some money to do it. It doesn't help you to grow, to develop, or to expand your thinking, right? And so the way I approached it was, what's good about what you wrote? What should you have done differently? Here's the grammar mistakes. And then, talking with some other people, like looking at like, is this logical? Does it actually answer the question that was trying to be answered? And so the output then is not like, here's the better paper. It's the output is like, this is how you should improve yourself.
Yeah. There's a lot of models that I've heard, and it's funny because you can tell that we're not settled yet because you'll hear the exact opposite. Some people say write it ugly and just use the AI to polish it. Use it for the first draft.
Yeah.
Don't use it for the first draft. I tend like
Hmm.
because I use AI to help me with my writing and not to write for
Yeah.
me, but I will come in and say, here's my
Yeah.
concepts. This is my first draft. I like to write it ugly and just
Yeah.
get something out, like get my
Hmm.
ideas out, and then, I'll go
Yeah.
through and reorganize maybe with it, or, look to say,
Yeah.
read this and tell me what you think. Where is it weak? Where
Hmm.
does it not make sense? I like having that kind of feedback. But I don't sit there and use
Yeah.
it. Like I don't tell it to write me an article about blah, 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 and, just see what it comes back with and then
Yeah.
put my name on it. Like that's not, that's
Yeah.
lazy. Like that's slop. Like that's not gonna, it could be
Yeah.
a good article, but it's still lazy. Like it's still, you're not doing the work.
Yeah. And I think there's a fine balance, right, between and this will be you'll see, I think what was it for you? There is a term, right, that the AI is going to expose the lazy leader,
It
right?
will. Yeah. I think that what you're gonna see, it's gonna expose a lot of laziness. It's also going to close the gap between the really high performers and the mediocre performers because the high performers are not going to get super charged. They will get incremental benefits and they will get better, through using the tool. But I think what you're going to see is a lot of
Mm,
people that are in that kind of middle performance tier. They will close the gap with the higher
mm,
performers by using AI. And there's, McKinsey has a study that showed this. I think Gartner has a study that kind of has also supported that.
mm.
And again, we're early in the process of learning these things, but
Yeah.
it really is interesting of what it's going to do to work expectations. I just think that it can be a really powerful tool if you use it the right way.
We're learning how to do that, how to use it the right way. I was just gonna say it's a lot of really interesting challenges for leaders today, right? How do we use this the right way?
Yeah, and I honestly believe that, regardless of whether an AI bubble bursts, or, we dramatically change or we find a different balance point, the technology's here, it's not going away. Like we're not going to go backwards.
Yeah.
So like I even like and again, going bringing it back to the coaching, we have to encourage people to learn, to try, to engage, and to, like I say, it's on ramping. It's like finding out how you can start the process so that you can get more comfortable. And I know one of your
Mhm.
guests said something very similar. There, get comfortable being uncomfortable, which is something that I've lived with my entire life. It's like, but one of our professors at Columbia would always say that there's no comfort in the learning zone and there's no learning in the comfort zone. And so, working through that, you gotta be, I guess it was Les, I think it was a really great pod that you guys did. It's true. You gotta kind of jump into the cold water and eventually you'll figure it out. Which is, again, if we're going to bring
Yeah.
it back to our kids, like I
Yeah.
if anything, I'm hopeful and I have total confidence. My daughter is like my youngest is amazing with, technology, and I think that she is going to do
Mhm.
like the things that I was always good at tech, but the things that I feel
Mhm.
like she's gonna pass me, I mean, like we're hyper
Mhm.
competitive with each other, so I'm not sure I'm ready to concede just yet. But I have confidence and hope and faith that this next generation is going to do some pretty amazing things, as I'm sure our parents felt about
Well, I
us.
mean, that's yeah, I mean, that's what we wanna do is we don't wanna, like, push our kids down, that next generation. We wanna
Right.
lift them up and leave them in a better place so that they can go further and further than what we've been able to do. I was just thinking, in university, I used to work for a bank as a teller. They went through a software update. Okay, not even like a software change, just an update.
Right.
But the update was significant enough that like some of the UI changed, some of the processes changed, all for the better, obviously, right? But it was like there's a lot of complaining about like, oh, why can't we go? Why do we have to upgrade? Why do we have to change? Like, I don't like what happened. I could do this before, and now it's all changed. And I'm just I can kind of see you smirking a little bit. You've seen that, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a natural change function, and it's there's a process that you go through, and there's this really great infographic that I use when I'm trying to coach people, because there is a rear
Hmm.
facing, I guess, mentality of what you're losing. And when you're at your worst and you're
Yeah.
most challenged in a change process, the only thing that can get you out of that is the focus on what you're getting, where the future is going to take you, and really kind of changing your orientation to be forward thinking as opposed to what I'm losing and what I'm giving up. And I mean, like you're describing a classic experience. Nobody wants to like. It was easy. I just knew where everything was. I could click here, click there, and boom, I'm running. Now I got to click, there and here instead of, so it's a little bit different. Like you said, the UI, it was probably different, but it was probably better. I don't know the details obviously, but
Yeah.
it was an improvement. You don't upgrade because you want to make people's lives miserable. Like, I mean, you're trying to make an improvement, and getting them on that orientation path to see that is that critical change component.
And that's kind of also the concern, right? Because again, organizations, you have IBM and you have all these massive organizations like, any large organization, right? You're going to have people who don't want to adapt and learn. And I was listening, I forget who I was talking to, but they were saying like that there's been so many companies have thrown so much money into adopting AI, but the actual output of like the investment into AI and what their ROI on that hasn't been significant. My assumption is like, oh, it's these people just haven't either one been taught how to use it, like there's no like good onboarding training on how to use and apply the AI, or they're just unwilling to learn that. And I wonder if you're facing that with some of the leaders and that the organizations they're trying to bring it in, but they're having difficulty like pushback from or like just a lack of I'm comfortable where I am. I don't need this AI thing.
I mean, it's kind of a stew of all the things you just said. I mean, there are people that are comfortable and that
Mm,
don't want to make the change, and that's human nature. I think that, there was I don't know if this is what you were citing, but there was a McKinsey study, from early 2024 saying, there was all this
mm,
investment and their boards were
yeah.
saying, "Hey, we're not getting any ROI on this. It's been 18 months. What's the deal?" And what a lot of that that was the leadership failure. And what I mean by that, and I know it
Mm,
sounds a little bit on the harsh side of things, but they didn't prep their people. I don't think. So what we
Mhm.
really saw was a tremendous amount of personal productivity gains. Like I'm writing better emails. I'm
Mhm.
organizing I've got this thought partner, but they didn't look at their organization. They looked at it as a tool that I'm just going to buy and put into play, and it's going to make everything faster, more cost efficient, whatever your metric is. And I don't think they looked at, again,
Yeah.
going back to what you were saying, systems thinking. Like, how are we working now?
Mhm.
What is the change in work that is, and how do you extract value and ROI from that? So that's what I think
Yeah.
you're going to start hearing more and more about in the coming, year. I mean, you're probably hearing about it now, but that's
Yeah.
where we're going to get change. And all those pieces, like, you know, I've seen a couple of companies do this really well, where but they didn't even really touch the technology for the first like 3 to 6 months. They were building up like a resilience reservoir for their people to get them ready for this massive
Mm.
change and transformation that was going to go on. And I'm studying a little of that
Mm.
now, so I can't really articulate it, but like that's really what I
Yeah.
think is the big component of it. Because then when you put the tool in and you've rethought work and you've reorganized your systems, then like that's when, like 2 plus 2 makes
Yeah.
10. You're really jumping ahead.
I was just picturing like you're driving like a little Honda Civic, and then suddenly someone dropped like an F1 engine into that thing, and you're just like, what the heck do I
Right.
do?
Right. Right. You're going fast, but man, you're gonna crash into something.
So this has been a really fun conversation, but I want to bring it back a little bit to the business side of coaching, right? So you said 4 years ago you kind of got back and gonna take on like coaching more seriously, right? What does that mean, or what did that mean for you?
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm going to tie it back to the identity question that we were talking about. So when I stopped working and I left the corporate world, so to speak, I went through an identity crisis. I was like, who am I? Like I spent 24 years at that, like with that same group of people, building that up. And I was like,
Mm,
we used to
yeah.
joke, I could say something and we could get people moving in direction. I couldn't get my kids to empty the dishwasher when I got home. So and I'm not a command and control kind of person, but I was like, this is a weird place to be. Like, I didn't like, so I went into the proverbial wilderness and said, what do I really love to do? And, I spent some time really thinking about it. Fortunately, I had really good self-awareness skills. And what I settled on was the through lines in my career were solving problems and, developing people. And so that's why I launched my business as a strategic advisory for entrepreneurs and people that are building their business. So I do consulting. And then also, my
Hmm.
true love, which is really helping people identify their, opportunities, problem, challenge, whatever it may be, and helping them knock them down. So I knew that I could coach just because I spent my career developing leaders. But what I didn't realize was, there is an orthodoxy that goes along with, the coaching, like the techniques, the different the neuroscience involved with it. And people come to coaching usually from two different directions, either the school of hard knocks and experience, like a true academic leader, L&D type of, organizational development background. I was never going to be that second group. I was the first one. So I was like, how do I build that out? And so I'm taking the experience that I got through my certification at Columbia. I'm in the process of ICF certifying right now. And that's really teaching me a lot of the
Mm.
organizational stuff that really helps me. I will go back. You mentioned earlier that you were a Lego person. I can tell you I
Hmm.
know enough about myself that I was the kid who built Legos by basically reading the instructions, putting all my pieces into their color piles, really organizing it. Even when I cook now, I always have like like I always have the spices prepped and everything else. It's just the way I'm wired. I knew that I was going to have to learn about this before I really kicked off and went. And so I took a little bit of time, like learning about what I was good at, who my, ideal customers are. I went through the whole marketing, like building my customer profiles, outreach,
Yeah.
and then just, kind of launched from there. But you got to just go. And it just was in the last 6 to 8 months that I was like, all my Legos are set. I know where I gotta go. I just gotta get out there and do it and not block myself or say I need
Hmm.
to read one more book or so if I'm going to give any, like, again, I'm not one that likes to like necessarily lean on advice, but I would just go with the go, just do it, guys. If you're out there looking to get started, figure it,
Yeah.
go and paint the plane while you're flying a little bit. It's always a lot of fun when you're doing that too.
I think that there's like one of the hardest things for many coaches. I think you're a little bit of like an edge case because you came up as a entrepreneur,
Hmm.
right? So you've gone through those paces and you understand like what it takes to build the business. But often a lot of coaches are coming from more corporate or more traditional backgrounds, right? And so I think that often what I hear, and I'd love to understand if you hear this as well, is like marketing. I don't like marketing. Like I don't want to be salesy. I don't want people to think I'm doing that. Sales calls, like, oh, that was great, but just whenever you're free, just get back to me, right? And so I think that one, there's a fear of putting yourself out there, and we often mask it as, I'm not going to be salesy. They're afraid of actually just being in public. And do you hear the similar things in the circles that you're in about those things?
I'm less of an edge case than you would think. It totally resonates with me. When you go from a really small outfit to being involved in 3,000, 5,000 people, you kind of lose that drive to be the salesperson. Like even though that there's an entrepreneurial
Mhm.
spirit to it, like and to be honest with you, like
Mm,
I was always really good at being the guy behind the guy or the guy behind the gal that made the stuff happen. So I didn't want to go out and sell. I was never
mm,
like I'm, one of the worst things about me as a coach at times is and I hope my clients don't listen to this and hear this, but if you bought me a beer, I'd probably sit and do a lot of what I would do as a coach, even if we just were talking and hanging out. That's always been my personality. So making that transition to having a structured conversation, even if it feels like to make it feel natural, but still have a call to action and try to get them to a sale. That takes work, and it takes practice, and you
mhm.
just gotta again like get comfortable with that because it's not a comfortable spot for me to be in. I don't like to necessarily go out. I don't like to be a salesperson, and I'm not knocking salespeople. It's just it's people have
Yeah,
preferences, and that's not one of mine.
yeah,
But you have to cultivate that. Like, and I do go back to, so here's where
mm,
I do have a benefit, like the entrepreneur spirit of, hey, this is, I know what the problem is. I got to solve it. Do I go out and hire somebody to help me do lead gen? Maybe. Do I, just knuckle down and
mm,
do it myself? That was my preferred path. I mean, I know enough that I don't want to pay
mm,
necessarily to have somebody, but there are plenty of coaches that I know that are like, hey, I'm going to go work for, coaching like Better Up or one of those, organizations that does that and
mhm.
handles that for them. Because
Yeah,
if you ask me, and I'm going to be completely honest, I just love to coach. I love to just sit down and talk to
yeah,
somebody. That's where I'm happiest. The other stuff
yeah,
is a necessary evil. I mean, I don't want to like, maybe that's too dramatic. I mean, but you got to do it to run a business.
yeah,
But it really is,
yeah.
it does require that. But know that going in, know what your
Yeah.
strengths are.
I would say that 95% of the coaches I've spoken to, exactly the same thing. They just want to coach.
Hmm.
They just want to help people. And that's what I love about coaches, right? They want to just help people. The problem is that with you can only help so many people until you run out of money.
Yeah. And so this
So
is
you have to build the business.
So this is where the entrepreneurial piece comes in, and this is where I'm going to lean back on my experience because the company that we had, I loved being there. And we always, we talked about
Mm,
every meeting. Like I was very transparent with the finances of the company, and well, you can't be completely 100% transparent with everything, but we wanted
yeah.
everybody to draw a through line from the work that they were doing to the revenue we were generating because we wanted to keep the lights on so we could come back and do what we love tomorrow. And that sticks with me as like, yes, I love to coach, but I want to coach for the next 10 years. And if I want to do that, there's a part of me that's got to build the business and, you know,
Yeah.
even just feed the client base is like to keep that building and going. Because to be honest with you, coaching has I don't hire people don't hire me to like as lifelong coach. Like, there's a transaction period. It's like 6, 9, 12 months, whatever it may be. If I'm doing my job right, there's an ending,
Mm,
like, and yes, I love to stay in touch with my
mm,
clients and my coaches, my folks, but
yeah.
if I'm still doing this 2, 3 years later, then either we're recontracting and changing, or we're not getting it
Yeah.
done. There's a trade-off there that comes into play.
Yeah. The one pushback that I'd like to give is you brought up like perspective, right? Like talking about perspective, how you're looking at AI and business, right? And I would say your perspective on marketing and sales might need to have a shift. And why I say that is because I realize it for myself because same thing. I like to be the background guy. In high school, I like to be on the wall watching everybody
Hmm.
else, right? I was the observer. I was the guy tinkering in the background doing building the business and systems and processes. And what I realized for coaches is that the mentality that you have about marketing is, oh, now I have to go and sell myself. I got to be out there and be visible. And I have to like, and it's all this stuff I don't like to do, which is true enough. But the fact is that even talking with you right now and talking with every coach I've spoken with for this podcast, I could say that if they were to work with somebody for 6 to 12 months, the people that they work with, I would say probably 95%, 90% of the people will be changed through that interaction for the better, right? So if you take that premise of what you're doing is going to change somebody's life for the better, and now I'm putting it in this way, which is so you're ethical, you believe that the work that you do helps people. If you think that the work that you do helps people will improve their life, is it not your responsibility then to try to help as many people as you can,
I like the way you're framing that.
right?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, and I'll tell you this, like I am a better marketer today than I was yesterday, and I'm going to be a better one tomorrow because I'm learning. And
Mhm.
what I'm saying and what I was
Yeah.
mentioning earlier is that I like I it's not it wasn't a natural process for me. So
Yeah.
I'm in that uncomfortable like
Yeah.
zone of like learning right now.
Yeah, so my point is that if you turn the perspective of I'm just trying to like make money and get new clients to I'm trying to help people, and the way that I help people is creating more exposure for myself by talking about how I help leaders, that naturally leans into the marketing that you can do. If you, the way you approach it is from that perspective of I want to help as many people as I can. The way I can help many more people is by creating more awareness about the work that I do. So I'm going to go shout it from the mountaintops and be like, hey, you may not want this, but I want to help you. This is how I help you. And so then you just start talking about it and you talk about it to anybody who'll listen. Because, if you see a guy on the side of the road who's got who's bleeding, you're going to be like, let me help you. But they might be like, "No, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, I'm okay." And you're like, but they don't know you're a doctor. So they don't want to accept your help. Most people don't know about coaches or coaching, and so they don't know they need your help.
Yeah, that's
So you have part of it is you have to go out there and mark and talk about what you do so they understand how you help them.
a good point. And that's the gem I'm going to walk away from with this because like I said, I'm going to be better tomorrow than I am today. I can't wait for tomorrow. Like that's a Joe Namath quote. Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of flipping it on its head a little bit, but at the end of the day, that's a really good frame for me to start to shift my thinking into, and I appreciate that. Just want to say that for sure.
For me, like I've been working in some form or manner in this coaching space for 12 plus years. And I've just seen so many wonderful coaches and people who, after 2, 3 years, are gone. They're not coaching anymore and they couldn't figure it out. And so that is like, why not? Because the whole business thing, there are certain activities that if you set yourself and discipline yourself to do and you approach it, then you should be able to, in most situations, be able to build your business. The problem is that most coaches, they don't want to do the marketing or sales. They're not really sure what the roadmap is of how to do it, and they're too busy doing the coaching to figure out the business development side of that.
Listen, I've seen it. I've actually one of the sadder parts of watching my cohort and my circle, like there have been people that have
Mm,
stepped out, or have gone back and have, and I don't say that with any judgment. I mean, maybe it was the best opportunity that came along that they left and went back to corporate world, but I've seen
yeah,
people, leave coaching, and you're right. It's sad because every one of them brought something really amazing to the cohort and to their, I'm sure, to their clients and to the work. So, you are going to give me new ways to think about this as far as even just ways I can tweak the stuff that
Mhm,
I'm doing. I will say that, like I mentioned, I'm not thrilled doing it, and it's a preference, not a like, I'm never one to shy away from something that's going to challenge me and help me grow, because I do believe that
yeah.
that's, coach heal thyself kind of thing is, I mean, really what, is the important thing. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing that with me. I thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. I think that this is probably one of the things that will define the work that I do with my with other coaches is helping them to realize that is if you want to help more people, you need to build your business, and the way that you look at the business is really important. Like you're not going to do the marketing when you just hate the marketing. But if you can change your perspective on it and to find the way to like pull you forward, you're going to be more motivated to do it. And so, yeah, coaches are they're not in it for the money, but they're in it to help people. The way you help people is the only way you can help more people is by telling them you're there, how you help them, so that they can find you.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
Um,
I really like that. And I'm gonna. I like, tomorrow is a little bit of my marketing. I've got a couple hours devoted to marketing, and so I'm gonna, bake this in and see where it takes me.
just so to your business, how do you do you separate then your time? Do you set like specific days and blocks of time for your business development, like marketing and contacting people, things like that?
Played around with this, and again, like, what works for me may not work for everybody else, but I kind of segment my week. And the first couple hours,
Mhm,
I have found through trial and error that the first couple hours on a Monday are some of the best days for me to start engaging with leads, doing any kind of social media like prep posting that I want to do, so that I can, drop them out, breadcrumb them out over the course of the week. And then,
mhm,
then I go and, by Monday afternoon and into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm usually working on my, serving my clients, doing my, my meetings, having my coaching engagements. And then Friday, I really kind of close the week by doing some AI learning. I spend the first 3 hours on like
mhm.
whatever, even if it's reading or, just podcast, article, whatever, whatever catches my attention. I spend the first three
Yeah.
hours just like, I call that personal development for me. And then, Friday is, by the end of the day on Friday, is like my reflection time. And like, what did I learn this week? What am I going to apply? What am I taking forward? Does it always follow
Yeah.
that schedule? No. I mean, like, life has a way of getting in the way, but, and I'm in a customer service
Yeah.
focused business. So sometimes I'm coaching on Fridays, but generally speaking,
Yeah.
I find that I'm better in structure, and I like setting it up
Mhm.
like that. But I have to devote time to business development.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll just gravitate towards the other. I'll gravitate towards the other stuff.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think the discipline and structuring it makes it easier. There's the Atomic Habits book where it's just like if you set it up in a structure, then you don't really need to think about doing it. You have your time, you just do it, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the other things that is a lot of coaches don't do is necessarily set that time regularly to do it.
Yeah, and I think a big function for me, David, to kind of, like, really also add to that, like a yes and, is to really understand where my energy was, because that's what I was trying to do those on the
Mm,
business development on Fridays. And knowing that it
mhm.
wasn't something that I naturally fell into, and knowing that I was gonna have to summon energy,
Mhm.
like a Friday midday was not like the best time of the week for me to tackle. And that's me. So that's why I said I'm shifting this to
Yeah,
Mondays, because I'm gonna eat the frog, or whatever
yeah,
whatever the saying is like, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna commit to it, I'm gonna get it out of the way, and
yeah,
then I'm gonna, and then if I want to do more on Friday, that's great, but I'm not like doing it when my energy's at a
yeah,
low ebb.
yeah. No, I love it. I think that's super important. So we've been talking for a lot longer than I expected.
Okay.
So before we close, I'd love to ask, I have a couple of questions I asked before closing. First is, what have you learned about yourself through this process of becoming a coach and coaching?
I have learned, I think I'm probably going to go to a callback to what I was saying earlier, is that I'm not an experiential learner. I am more of a book and process learner. So like when I'm in
Hmm.
that, and I went through got some assessments done, and understood how my brain works and processes just through the use of that. Like, I like to have things
Mm.
organized, and I know that I'm at a point where I've got to jump and go when I've read enough. Like, it's a confidence building thing. And so what I
Right.
realize is I got to build the time in to give me that, and then also kick myself in the butt to get me out of that safe zone. Because, again,
Mm.
there's a diminishing return on every book and article you read. Like, at some point you know it and you just got to do it. So that was something that I did learn
Yeah.
going through this.
And what's one piece of advice that you'd give to somebody who's just beginning their coaching journey?
Wow, there's a lot. I mean, I think it's be a friend to yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself.
Mhm.
Like, give yourself the space to learn. It's an organic process,
Mm.
and just as you said
Yeah.
earlier, you're going to do a lot of good for people. Generally speaking, coaches come in
Mm.
with great intentions and good heart, and be patient with yourself as you're learning this process, especially if it's a new transition you're making in your life.
Rob, thank you so much. Before we close, how can people get in contact with you?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. That's probably one of the best places to find me. You can also connect with me on my website. It's ottmgt.com. So www.ottmgt.com for op management. And then, those are probably the two easiest places to get a lot of info about me. And then there's links that you can directly connect with me through both of those places.
You also have a Substack.
I do. I do. It's the spark of leadership. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's where I do some writing and exploring on leadership and AI.
Right. Very cool. We'll have all those links in the show descriptions. Rob, thank you so much for this conversation. It's really a lot of fun exploring AI, leadership, and getting to know you today.
Yeah, it was a thrill. I really appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time for me. And I love the work you're doing, David, and keep it up.
All right. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next time. Want to stop guessing and start building a marketing system that actually fills your calendar? Head to kyber5.com/coachops and let's get systematic. That's it for today's episode. I hope you grabbed something useful you can actually apply in your business. If you did, leave a comment or share it with a friend. And hit subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you next week.